Kia ora, good evening. Russia, Kazakhstan and Belarus have officially notified New Zealand of a temporary restriction of dairy imports from 61 of the 83 dairy plants approved for export. The Ministry for Primary Industries and Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade are working to reopen the market. Fonterra says it's working closely with the appropriate authorities to reassure them of product safety. Fonterra says none of the potentially affected whey protein concentrate was supplied by Fonterra to those countries. Total dairy trade to Russia last year was around $106 million and around $300,000 to Kazakhstan. There were virtually no New Zealand dairy products exported to Belarus. The South Island's 5 district health boards have saved millions of dollars over the past year by working together. Working collectively to reduce costs of purchasing a range of supplies has saved South Island DHBs $14.4 million. Making joint purchases has meant savings on items such as medical gases, hemodialysis supplies and patient warming technology, through to more mundane items like envelopes and plastic bags. Each DHB is now able to put the savings back into providing health services locally. Police are investigating a fire at a block of flats on Tweed Street in Invercargill on Monday night. The fire at around 9:20 p.m. was in a back porch and has caused severe damage to that area. The occupant was sleeping in the flat at the time of the fire and was unharmed. Police are seeking the public's help and would like to hear from anyone who may have seen any people or vehicles in the area between 8 and 9:20 p.m. A petition asking for a living wage of $18.40 an hour was signed by dozens of union members in Invercargill today. First Union, which represents retail, banking, transport and other industry workers, is holding a series of meetings around the country. A living wage was among topics being discussed. As workers left, they signed pledge posters which will be sent to local MPs. It says members pledge to campaign for decent work and against poverty and inequality, a living wage, jobs for all, secure safe work, 26 weeks paid parental leave plus fair employment laws, and calls on local representatives to do the same.
The posters that 84 members who came to our meeting today have signed will go to government, members of parliament around the Southland area to show them the opposition from workers in this area to the changes to the Employment Relations Act that the government are trying to ram through at the moment.
What are the union's concerns with that act?
The unions are concerned that the power relationship in a job, employers always have more power. The whole purpose of employment law is to try and equalise or balance that power and give workers more power so they can actually negotiate better conditions, better wages and that sort of thing. What the government has chosen to do is to take away a number of the protections for workers in the proposals for this new act, which will mean it will be even harder for us to get a wage rise for our members, harder for members to get actually better conditions. And it flies in the opposite direction of what in fact the government are doing and has been forced to do in the health and safety area because of the Pike River inquiry, which is bringing unions back into the area of health and safety, which they'd been locked out previously. The government don't seem to see the contradiction. Big business are telling them that they'd rather not have unions interfering in their companies, and the government are just kowtowing to what big business are asking them to do.
Now, something that was raised at today's meeting is a living wage. How important is that for workers?
The living wage is very important, as you know, our union and the Service Workers Union and a number of church and other groups got together about a year and a half ago, formed the Living Wage Committee. We paid for some economists and social scientists to come up with what would an hourly rate be that would be the minimum to sustain a family of 4 if, say, one partner was working full-time, one was working half-time, and the figure they came up with was $18.40. That's well above, that's almost $5 above the minimum wage. So for our union, we've got the bit between our teeth and we're focusing our bargaining and all our discussions on how do we get companies to move up to actually paying their workers a minimum wage, a living wage as a minimum, rather than the government minimums, which are really just starvation wages.
New Zealand's population of those aged 65 and over has doubled since the early 1980s, and it's likely to double again by 2040, making it the fastest growing segment of the population. Those aged 65 plus now make up 14% of the population, according to Statistics New Zealand, and in the past 2 years, almost 50,000 people have moved into the age bracket. In the year to June, New Zealand's total estimated population was 4,470,800, up 37,700 on the previous year. Net migration was 7,900, increasing just over 11,000 compared with the previous June year. Stay with us. After the break, we look at why lack of collaboration in New Zealand's red meat industry is forcing farmers to weigh up the value of green pastures. Welcome back. Creating behavioural change across the red meat sector is behind an industry-wide agreement focusing on best practice, market coordination and line of procurement. The red meat sector strategy provides a framework where farmers and companies can collaborate, but with industry players continuing to enable inefficiencies, farmers are weighing up the value in land use.
There are a number of scenarios that could happen, but effectively the numbers of stock coming through and the capacity that the industry has is too great. The numbers are too short. And the variability in profitability is leading farmers to change land use. It's leading to a lot of frustration, and this really sent us back to the other key plank, which is aligned procurement. There has to be a better option than the spot market, friction. We're not getting clear signals, which is part of the analysis by the red meat sector strategy. Clear signals back to the farmer about what's actually required for the consumers, what sort of quality, what sort of timing, and they're all sort of hazy because of the procurement competition issues. So this is one that the companies are in discussions on at the moment. They haven't yet come to a confirmed resolution, but I know some in-depth talk about how we stop focusing on procurement because the value end is actually in the market.
The change in land use, are you seeing a lot of that happening in Southland, and how far out do farmers have to plan for that?
Yeah, so there is a substantial amount of ongoing change. Now look, we've still got 9 million hectares of this country in pastoral land as sheep and beef, and so it's still a huge part of this country. It's iconic New Zealand. But the dairy industry is up 167% in herd numbers, and they've climbed from 1 million hectares to 2. And alongside that, in the 9 million hectares, a substantial amount of that area is now being dedicated to dairy support, dairy grazing, wintering.
So it's more profitable to take that easy risk of changing to grazing for a lot of sheep farmers?
Yeah, in terms of the grazing, you can basically determine what you're going to get. And with the model we're running in the sheep and beef sector, each Friday night you can find out you're being paid less, which is very disruptive. And forward planning you can't guarantee. You can get a winter income in grazing, and you can pretty much reliably know with your feed what sort of income that's going to be for that 3 to 4 months that you commit to. So again, you've got reliability, you've got bankability.
There's been a record increase in the food and beverage services industry and a rise in consumer spending in the June quarter, with increased sales in 12 of the industries recorded. Total retail sales volumes rose at 1.7%, with the largest movements in fuel retailing and department store spending up 5 and 5.4% respectively, according to figures released by Statistics New Zealand today. The value of total retail sales was $17.5 billion, up 3.3% in the June quarter compared to the same time last year. Total retail sales values and volumes have been generally trending up since mid-2009. 2 months ago, Southland Police began a rollout of new technology expected to see frontline staff spend more time on the streets. About 150 iPhones and 100 iPads were handed out to frontline staff. Area Commander Inspector Lane Todd says the new technology is proving hugely successful, allowing staff to be more mobile and spend more time in the field.
Project team estimated it will be about 30 minutes per shift per staff member. So if you equate that across our area, it's about 180 odd staff. That's quite a large chunk of time. It's probably too early to actually get that assessed yet, but that is being reviewed. But certainly, just with talking to the staff, they've noticed a big difference that they can be out in the field as opposed to sitting in the office.
Do you think this will translate into a drop in crime in the future?
Certainly that's one of the objectives, and that's part of our prevention first strategy, is to have our staff more visible. And so, like you say, it's only been 2 months, but it's certainly we're seeing a good impact already.
Now, are there plans to roll this out to other staff as well, or to further expand on technology?
Yeah, we've got our second wave of staff that'll be coming through. So at the moment, our CIB staff have just got the iPhone, but there's a new product that they're actually designing that the detectives will get. It's just a bit easier to type. So they don't get an iPad, they'll be getting a sort of a notebook, so it's a bit easier to type with. But that product's coming out next year.
Now, in terms of this, so far it's getting more officers out on the street doing work. I guess in terms of the resolution of crime, are we seeing crimes being resolved faster as well?
Yeah, certainly I'd expect that will be happening, and I can't talk about our crime stats for the end of the financial year quite yet, but there's certainly been a big increase in resolution, and just this last month, again, that's tracking really well because we're into the next financial year now. But I guess one of the big benefits is we have what we call pre-scheduled taskings for staff. So, for example, we'll have staff on night shift and the weekends obviously going to our hotels. So that's all pre-programmed into the system, and the staff get that via a text or a reminder via the phone. They do that task and then they can just sign that off again with a push of a button. So that saves a lot of paperwork and a lot of time. So it's just those sort of initiatives that are really, really good for us.
The 50s were alive and kicking, or rather hula hooping, at the Invercargill City Library today. Staff were attired in 1950s clothing today, and a hula hoop competition drew around 35 people. This week is Library Week, and the celebrations have a distinctly 50s theme, with entertainment including rock and roll demonstrations and a visit from Elvis. Events and design coordinator Jane Watkinson says the era was chosen as it was thought it would be fun, and it's hoped to show people the library is about more than books. Library Week has been running nationally for around 40 years. And that's it from the news desk this Wednesday. Coming up in sport, we profile New Stags assistant coach Mark Ozich from the news team. Good night.